Welcome everybody to the Multinet Community of Practice. Multinet is a multicultural disability network and training project here at the IDRPP that is housed at Utah State University. This community of practice is helping us both to develop a network among people interested in this in the topic between disabilities and the and diversity. And when we are talking about diversity, we are talking about any type of diversity, including race, ethnicity, gender identification, geography. Like in this case, we have the privilege that Rhiana Medina is going to present us about exploring the intersectionality between rurality and disability. It is a privilege to present Rhiana, who I know, and having the opportunity to keep learning from her. Rhiana Medina has been an active helping professional in the Salt Lake City and Moab areas. She has been in Utah since 2000. She has worked in several settings from property management to after-school programs and nonprofit organizations. She has a bachelor's degree from Utah State University in family life studies and sociology. Go Aggies. She moved to Moab in 2010 and became the executive director in 2012, where she is still working to create safe spaces and opportunities for Moab immigrant, homeless, and other vulnerable population. She also serves in a variety of community, regional, and statewide boards, including the Utah State Court Access to Justice Commission, the Moab Music Festival Board of Directors, the Regional Board of Health for Grant, Carbon, and Emery counties, and the Inclusion and Equity Opportunity Advisory Board of another organization. She is a certified community health worker, trained community interpreter, and Utah Notary Public. As we can see, Rhiana has a lot of experience, and yeah, I can expand what I have learned from her, but I don't want to steal any second from you, Rhiana. It is your show. Thank you for being part of this project.
Thank you, Eduardo, and thanks to everybody who has joined us today. And it's nice to see some of my rural colleagues here as well. Again, my name is Rhiana Medina, and I am the Executive Director of the Moab Valley Multicultural Center. And I'll tell you a little bit more for the folks who aren't familiar with the center. I have a couple slides that I can tell you a little bit more about where I work. Let's see here if my slides will move. Perfect. These are the great folks that I get to work with every single day. Currently, we have 8 staff. Most are full-time employees, and we try to divide and conquer in terms of lead roles in different areas, such as Sally is managing our public health grants. Those are mostly focused on still some COVID tracking that the government is interested in knowing about. And then Katie is our homeless grant coordinator. She also does direct case management with people experiencing homelessness or at risk for experiencing homelessness. And one thing that happened out of the pandemic here at the Multicultural Center is we went from having a small food pantry to having one of the county's largest, most accessible food pantries. It wasn't something that we meant to do, but it fits really well with a lot of the other services that we offer. And we have just been working on making that really low barrier and accessible and meeting the multicultural needs of the clients that are coming and needing some assistance with food security. I think it's also, interesting concept where food pantries would have community health workers and direct service support services, because if somebody is coming in and they're having trouble having enough money or resources to feed themselves and their family, there's probably all kinds of other things that they might be having difficulty with. So I'm really glad that the folks that are coming to our food pantry are are able to ask for assistance with other things that they might be struggling with, or be able to ask for help with an application to get on regular food stamps or what other resources they might be eligible for. We have 2 certified medical interpreters, that would be Zaida and Bradia, and everybody here, because we are a free walk-in community resource center, everybody here does do some direct client services with the folks that come and ask for help. So that is something that is really a joy to do. We divide the program offerings of the Multicultural Center into 5 main pillars. The first one we call Crisis, Resource, and Advocacy. And I talked a little bit about homelessness and food pantry, but we also do legal navigation, immigration legal services, and some case management for a variety of crises. Our language services are offered either on-site, in person, by phone, or virtually. We also do a lot of language support directly, sometimes in justice court or with public defenders. We do a lot of assisting the local schools with parent-teacher communication, whether that be conferences or discipline meetings, things of that sort. Our school district is only, every year it feels like the population of children that are needing second language services has just been growing and growing. So the school district is definitely one of our largest partners there. Our life skills support services, a lot of that is applications and forms, especially as everything has gone online these days. Not everybody has access or the ability to know how to fill out a form online. Sometimes documents need to be scanned and uploaded, and it's a lot of people. Yesterday, somebody was like, I have to apply for a job, and it's all via this website. And even though it had the option to go between English or Spanish, and his first language was Spanish, he still just wasn't sure how to fill out an electronic form or type. So that was something we were able to help with, and something we do often. We also offer services and referrals for people that might need help that's outside of our scope. So when somebody comes in, we try to understand the nature of their need, and if it is something outside of our scope, or we have a community partner like early intervention, then we can get them connected and signed up for those resources. Our youth programs have been ongoing since the inception of the center. It I think is a really important part of the prevention work, to give kids in our community an opportunity to have positive multicultural role models, and to give them as many opportunities that are possible for what their future could entail. We really keep our eyes open with our youth programs for things that perhaps might feel something that culturally they might not have the opportunity or normally do, to expose them to a wide variety of different opportunities. And then through our cultural education and outreach offerings, that sometimes looks like large events or small trainings like today. We booth with other community partners often at their events. And mostly, I like to think the broader mission here is that there is an organization in Moab that is very blatantly celebrating diversity and saying, we're a community that appreciates a multicultural and diverse population, and we celebrate each other, and everybody should have an opportunity to know that and feel safe and celebrate with everybody else. Let's see here. Welcome to those who have just joined. So a little bit about me. This is a picture of my father, Daniel Ramsey, and that's me when I was a baby. And I think for me, when I was asked to present to this network today, the first thing I thought about was about my dad, because I think my foundation for being able to connect with other people that have disabilities definitely comes from my knowing my father. He was wounded in the Vietnam War and lost a leg at 19 years old. So I had never known him to have two legs my whole life. And I think that as an adult, when I think back to being a child, I don't think I ever thought that that was anything other than normal, because I think everyone's normal is their normal. And he was really I think he was really determined to not let this slow his life down. He rode a Harley my whole life. He was an avid hiker and camper. You know, really, really active. He loves nature. He definitely instilled in my sisters and I a love of nature. And also I think that led him to a career serving other people with the same disability. He used his GI Bill to become a prosthetist and an orthotist. And he's 76 now, and he still kind of consults in that field a little bit. I keep telling him he needs to stop fake retiring, because he always says he's going to retire and then doesn't. But he's really passionate about it, and it's a really there's not a lot of people in that field, and the technology has come so far. So there have only been, you know, I think a couple of times that, you know, he put a very strong face forward. You know, he would wear shorts, he would do everything. But then, you know, I think when I got older, I started to understand a little bit about his identity around his disability and how that kind of overlapped with his identity culturally and his identity as a veteran. And, you know, I think the day that I got married, I wanted to do like a traditional father-daughter dance, and I didn't realize how nervous that was going to make him with his prosthetic leg, to have people looking at him dancing and maybe not moving as, you know, correctly or quickly as he perceived people would think that he should. So I think that was really, you know, probably the first time that I realized that he had any doubts about himself, and maybe any insecurity around that. So I'm really grateful for having that experience, having a disabled parent. I think it's a part of who I am. It's definitely, you know, my lived experience with that has allowed me to have compassion for other people with disabilities, and try to be aware about how complex their identity might be around their disability. And also being, you know, just having gone to work with him over the years when he was working, I was exposed to so many people with different disabilities that he was helping. So that was, I think, something that not every kid gets to be exposed to. Does anybody have any questions so far? Awesome. So I was telling Eduardo when I first hopped on, it was so neat to see such a recently published document about the intersectionality between rurality and disability. There is an awesome document that was just published that has a whole bunch of data around that intersectionality. And this is a few things that I was able to gather from that report, that people in rural areas have the highest percentage of reported disabilities. And these rural counties here are some of the most rural. And then 3.1 million people with disabilities live in rural areas nationwide. I thought that was an impressive number as well. certainly, I think it's, and also I don't, I've been having a difficult time asking the Office of Homeless Services to kind of put some parameters around what they, when we ask a question about if somebody, identifies as disabled. And I've found that is something that is, we don't really have a set definition, and we can maybe talk about that a little bit more at the end of the presentation. But I thought that was, there's all these different sectors that maybe ask that question, but they're maybe not defining it the same. So that's something I think I would love to ask you guys more about. And then this yellow box here was also from that same report that was published. And I thought I would take a little bit of time to tell you my own personal experience and some feedback from some of my colleagues here in Grand County about what their thoughts were about healthcare systems or resources in rural areas, what's good and what's bad. So the report says that there is a lack of healthcare providers in rural areas. I would say that is certainly true for Moab, although we're luckier than some. I do remember when I lived in the Salt Lake area for 10 years before I moved to Moab. And at that time, our new hospital hadn't been built yet. And I was given directions to go to the hospital that existed before. And I drove right by it because I literally did not realize that a hospital could be that small. I was like, I just kept driving and I'm like, I can't find it. Because it was this 1-story kind of older brick building. And that was my first experience seeing a rural hospital that small. So our new hospital has just been expanded so that we're going to have some pharmacy services in it now. That's super exciting. But we still do lack a lot of medical services that people living with disabilities could really benefit from having access to. I know that they're constantly always looking for people to come and visit and do clinics. And between our free health clinic and our hospital, we've definitely, and the early intervention services bring in a lot of specialists, but rural Utahns do a lot of waiting for that, because they're not here all the time, and you better just be hoping that you can get a spot in for that time that they can come and be here. So there's some anxiety around that, right? About when there's scarcity. The report also said that there's a lack of services for intellectual and developmental disabilities. This is absolutely true. It's something that's really, really hard, I think, for any helping professional when you are trying to help somebody find resources, and when they either don't exist or they don't have access to them for whatever reason. That might be insurance, might be their immigration status, it might be something else. But I would say even more than healthcare providers, intellectual and developmental, experts with this knowledge, we really have a lack of that. I was actually interpreting for the Department of Child and Family Services yesterday, and they have so many clients that they could use more expertise for children on the autism spectrum disorder, and they're really struggling to find services for those children. And it's, on one hand, we have these guaranteed rights for these children in schools to receive these services, but you can't, when those things don't exist, it takes a lot of effort to try to get people here and also get them to stay here. So that's something that I think is a little bit unique to Moab in terms of being a rural area. I would tell you guys that a lot of people come to Moab and a lot of people leave Moab. And I don't know if that's as true for my other rural colleagues that I've spoken to. We have a lot more people that come and go. Increased travel time to access services. For those of you who haven't been to Moab, Salt Lake City is about 4 hours from us. So it's definitely, if we have to go to Salt Lake City to access special medical care, it's the expense of that, of course, not just, sometimes you can go down and up in a day, but it's the meals and the time, and of course, not everybody has a driver license or somebody that can take them as well. So transportation can be a really big barrier. And there are even services that there's some transportation services that Medicaid provides. It's just not, it's never easy to coordinate those things. Longer response times by emergency medical teams. I don't think that I could tell you guys that I have any experience living here in Moab in terms of response times for medical teams, but when I think about some rural areas, like the Navajo Reservation in San Juan County, how dispersed and how some of those places don't have actual the address is like 2 houses down from the chapter house or something like that. I can imagine how difficult that might be for emergency services to get to somebody in time. In Moab, we're quite a small city. I think our emergency services are quite good. We do have some outlying areas. We have a little town called Castle Valley that's about 30 minutes away from the town center. And yeah, if you had a disability and you live that far out of town, you'd be waiting for a moment for sure. Increased reliance on social support network to access services. I thought that was interesting in the report that was published, that was something unique to rural areas as opposed to urban areas. I guess I didn't know that was more. There was increased reliance on social support network services in rural areas as opposed to urban areas. I think, it occurs to me that when people come to my organization to ask for help, it's often because they don't have other people that can help them. So yeah, maybe rurality equals just a little bit more isolation because of we're less, densely populated. But I can definitely tell you that here in Moab, there's quite a few folks that live with disabilities that if they didn't have access to social service support networks, they would not be able to meet their basic needs sometimes. So that is, it's really, really important. I think community is really, really important in our areas. Healthcare providers often do not understand rural life constraints. I think that's true, but I would also say that when I have done medical advocacy, whether that be because of second language barrier or just a client, that is needing healthcare, that is dealing between, either a rural provider or an urban provider, that they have to go back and forth. I think that the education piece here is that a lot of sometimes medical healthcare providers are telling the patient what they need to do, but forgetting to ask, like, if they're able to do that, right? You need to get this prescription filled. Do they have the money to get do they have insurance to get that prescription filled? Are they physically able to make it to a pharmacy? Do they have a vehicle? There's a lot of times when people come here, when there's a medical issue, a lot of times it's just like, you do this, it's the what, but there's that gap, I think, that exists in the how people, if they're able to do it or not. I love the model of that I'm seeing more and more in healthcare, where they have social workers that, the more that we have any kind of helping professional or social worker working in the medical field, it's really great when I see that kind of care being provided, because they are answering that gap, and oftentimes they're helping people with disabilities or whatever barrier exists for them. I know I have a few clients that are dealing with cancer that are having to go to Salt Lake quite a bit, and they have care coordinators, family, care coordinators assigned to those families that coordinate with people in my office to, like what resources, we share resources with each other, because we both have limited resources, but together it's double the resources that benefits that family. And I know our hospital here in Moab recently hired another social worker to work on the healthcare team. We have 2 ER case managers where we never had any before. So I think that it's probably something that came out of like a very obvious need. But the more that we do have professionals working right in those medical settings, the better it's going to be for people with any kind of disability, I believe, because they work with people like me, and then we build really strong alliances and everybody benefits. So this slide is also another graphic from that report. The report said that some of the benefits of rural living are a shared sense of community pride. I absolutely think that's true. We take care of our own. A lot of people are willing to help anybody because they're another community member. Strong social networks and support. I would say absolutely, between the nonprofit organizations and organizations like the early intervention program and the health department. A lot of times rural areas have very innovative social networks and support, because when you have fewer resources, I think innovation comes from scarcity. So I appreciate that, and I really try to apply that to the work that I do here. I think that sometimes I think government grant funds sometimes don't realize how difficult it is for rural areas to be able to meet the requirements that rural health grants, public health, or whatever it is. They apply a model that fits a very urban centric model, and then when rural areas apply for those grants, they have a much more difficult time having the same number of resources to be able to do the reporting requirements, or to fit the model that the governments usually have some kind of evidence-based model or some kind of specific way that implementation. And sometimes I wish there was a little bit more room to say that doesn't work in rural Utah, but if you allowed me to do it this way instead, that would still meet the impact that you're trying to accomplish. So I think as an executive director of a nonprofit, I do a lot of advocacy that I hope is benefiting all other rural counties, when I say this doesn't work this way here, but I know a way that I can make it work. And oftentimes, I've been successful in being able to speak up about that. And sometimes not, and we just got to keep trying. But yeah, it's definitely a big chunk of the work that I do, for sure. Another benefit of rural living is a shared value of service and civic engagement. Yeah, absolutely. I think that for a town the size of Moab, or a city the size of Moab, to have as many volunteers and nonprofits that it has is really, really impressive. And I also, I see that a lot with religious groups, church groups in Moab that are doing a lot of service in a lot of rural areas as well. And then resourceful and resilient citizens, like you bet. I mean, I want to say that's true both rural and urban areas, but again, I think that that's, that's innovation. That's human beings going, I don't have this, so I'm going to take a piece of duct tape and a string and I'm going to figure it out, So I think that's all true. And I really appreciate the report kind of bringing some of those benefits up, because it's not all, there's definitely some benefits to living in a rural area, no matter what your barriers are. There's going to be pros and cons everywhere you go. Some of the things that the center has had some success for in terms of helping our clients that are disabled. Legal advocacy is a big one. It's in our community, we don't have a free legal services like office or nonprofit dedicated specifically to having legal services like you guys do in Salt Lake City. So what we can do is, the Multicultural Center has been doing legal advocacy for several years. I want to say our old outreach director who founded the center was invited on a committee with the Utah State Courts for self-represented parties. And that kind of gave birth to this model of the courts focusing on having resources available for people who don't have attorneys, especially with legal matters, but also in the criminal courts. I can think of several clients that I know that mostly have had an intellectual disability that I have been successful in court being able to address the judge, just, as me working for this organization with the client's permission, of course, saying what you've required for them from their sentencing is something that is going to be difficult for them to complete, right? If this person has this intellectual disability and you need them to complete this course that doesn't have accommodations, then it's going to set everybody up for failure, and this person's going to go to jail. And who is that going to help? So what are the resources? If we're solutions focused, I can talk to the client and I can try to identify a resource that can get them the accommodations that they need. So then the court you can file a motion and say, can I do this instead of that because I need this accommodation? And almost every single time it's an easy yes, but that person just probably was too afraid, intimidated, or didn't know how to ask for an accommodation. So having legal advocacy for people with all kinds of disabilities is extremely important. And like I said, this organization has probably saved people hundreds and thousands of dollars in time in jail just by, being able to help them speak up for themselves. Application assistance, I kind of went over that before. I think, applications can be overwhelming for a lot of people for a lot of different reasons. So that's one of the most common things people come in and ask for help with. Referrals or warm handoffs. I think it's important for a resource center like ours to try to build relationships with and be as knowledgeable as possible about all the resources that exist for somebody that might have any type of disability. So making a referral is, it's not a one-step thing usually. It's especially if you have rapport with somebody and you really know that they need another resource. It takes sometimes a lot of patience and compassion to be able to connect somebody to a resource that they don't feel comfortable going to because they're unfamiliar with it. But I do think also that when you work with community-based organizations like mine, if they are reputable, just having a referral from a reputable organization sometimes gives it a little bit more weight than than just something you might find off the internet, perhaps. So a lot of, like I said, it's just a lot of relationship building, and then people move on, and you kind of have to continue doing that all of the time. Care coordination with other professionals serving individuals with disabilities is great. We work with a lot of other advocates, community health workers, care coordinators, you know, whatever you might want to call them. I think that, you know, I realized probably through a series of several mistakes that if, you know, being clear about your communication, the more people you're working with at the same time to help one, you know, the same person, things can get complicated when there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen. So, you know, trying to be as clear as possible about who's doing what and keeping everybody in the loop. Some people are just better than that than others. And, you know, we're all in our best, but I think trying to reduce the stress for the person you're trying to help is always kind of the goal there. Our organization does also offer some limited financial assistance or help applying for grants or scholarships. We have a client right now that needs a prosthetic device, and they don't have any insurance. They don't qualify for any insurance. So we were able to get a referral from his provider to help him apply for a grant for that. So hopefully that'll be successful. And then, of course, you know, things like this, gathering and distributing information within our network, because things are always changing and being updated, and new resources, some coming, some going, all of the time. Probably one of the most frequent ways that that we help people here in Moab is with language access and with immigration legal services. I think that, you know, this is specifically when we're working with individuals with disabilities, medical interpretation is really important, and I'm really grateful for the state of Utah having a medical certification for language interpreters. I definitely, I'll share with you guys, and I share within my other statewide networks, that I think it would be really beneficial for the state to have a certification for community interpreters that isn't just specifically medically focused, because there's a lot of people that need language access that are everywhere, you know, not just within the medical field. And I think that there's a really great training that's kind of the gold standard for medical interpreters called Bridging the Gap, which Utah State University has just recently started offering, which is going to really expand access to a lot of people being able to become certified medical interpreters. But the more, I think that, you know, interpreting it's a very specific field and a very specific role. And it's something I think that I run into a lot with law enforcement, because it's not like the medical field where they're always using this best practice. It's something where they have access to some of these language tools. A lot of them are on the phone, so they kind of use them sometimes and sometimes not. And it's, I think, causing trauma in a lot of situations, especially for children. So I think I just will offer that to you, that I think having an ethics standard and a training standard for certification for language access professionals outside the medical field would be awesome. At our parent-teacher conferences, of course, we work really closely with the special education teams in our school district. There's something, some of you might be familiar with something called FLOSSM, which is Foreign Language Oral Skills Evaluation Matrix. And one of our medical interpreters took a course to get an additional certification so that she could help our special education department do a series of testing when they have a child where they want to determine if the child needs special education services, or is it just a language barrier that's preventing them from being behind in their learning. So through this FLOSSM matrix, she is helping our kids here in our schools that may have disabilities, but to try to separate out the language barrier from the special education needs. So that's, I think, super important. We talked about legal interpretation. And then in terms of immigration legal services, I think this is something, well, I know this is something really missing from rural areas. I think even in urban areas, it's not always easy to find either. Immigration legal services can be extremely complicated. It's a very specific branch of the law, but I think specifically for people with disabilities that also have immigration, questions or concerns, that it's really, really important to try to find factual information. And I know from my experience too that having a disability and also needing immigration legal services is kind of like another specific layer of complication. It can be something really important to an immigration case, especially, gosh, some people have only been able to have immigration benefits granted because of a relative that had specific medical needs or a specific disability that they needed to be here for their care to take care of. Also, there's these applications that need to be submitted to immigration. Oftentimes, if they have a disability, like what if they can't get to Salt Lake City for an interview? They really need an attorney or an advocate that can help fill out very specific forms that request accommodation. So yeah, it's definitely, immigration legal services in rural areas is almost non-existent. I know that, MVMC provides a narrow scope of immigration legal services, but to my knowledge, we are the outside of, there's one in St. George, but outside of that, I think that we are the only kind of low cost, accessible ILS program in the entire rural Utah. So that's definitely a need. And if somebody had a disability and needed that, they would probably need to visit Salt Lake City. How are we doing on time? This is, it was a video I was gonna play, but I want to leave enough time for a little discussion at the end. So I think I'm not going to play it, but I did pass the slideshow to Mindy. And this is a really cool TED Talk that I think I thought it was, I hope you guys watch it. It's really cool to listen to this woman talk about how people kind of painted her as one thing based on what they saw about her and her coming from Africa and what they imagined she would be like. And I thought, gosh, that's probably really true for a lot of people living with disabilities, is that sometimes people have a single story about them, especially if their disability is something that's really, forward facing, anything that is more apparent. If somebody has an accent when they speak, or if somebody, their skin color or the way they dress, can oftentimes create a single story around somebody. So I encourage you guys to listen to this TED Talk and kind of think about the intersectionality between disability and rurality, and how both of those, can be single stories. I mean, even me as a professional coming from rural Utah, do my urban counterparts think that I, maybe have the same level of understanding or expertise as somebody who, is living in Salt Lake? So rurality can also kind of create sort of a perception of maybe being a little country, or, something like that. It kind of depends who hears where you're from and how they imagine what, your level of education or professionalism might be. So that was kind of a lot to tell you about Moab, about me, about the Multicultural Center. Does anybody have any thoughts or any questions that they would like to share?
Sure. This is Dedi. First of all, I would like to apologize. I came late and then I had some technical issues with my computer, but I'm glad I'm here. Thank you, Rhiana, for the wonderful presentation. I really liked the part that, with the legal system, the judge requesting, a client to do certain things and not knowing that maybe the client may not even have the ability to do it. That did not even cross my mind before. But I kind of have a similar but a little bit different story like yours. So my father, he did not have disability when I was born, but then when I was young, he got into a car accident and then he fractured his hip bone. So we were very devastated at the time, and he went for medical treatment, but then he came and he was limping and he was using a staff. And we were concerned. We were trying to ask, okay, when are you going to be normal again? With both your feet without staff and stuff like that. So at the time, he knew he was not going to be, working without a staff, but he would not share with us. But with time, we grew up and then we just accepted that reality. But then when I had a child myself, whenever we would go out like to the park and stuff like that, and my daughter would see, someone with disability, she would, have that strange look in her face and stuff like that, sometimes making me very uncomfortable. So I would have to explain to her a lot of things, so that she would, kind of understand. But then I took her in 2017 in Africa to go see my parents. So at the time, he didn't know, of course, my father was working with the staff, because with social media, they were just talking on Facebook and stuff like that, but he would not see the whole thing. But then when she got there to Africa, and then she was able to see actually my father with the staff working and stuff, then she accepted that. And then I noticed that when we came back here, seeing somebody with disability, she would not have that weird or strange look in her face anymore, because now she's exposed to it and she sees that it's part of normalcy. It's normal, something that is abnormal. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing. I appreciate it.
Thank you for that. I really appreciate it. Yeah, and I think that exposure, is really, really important. I think that when we're little, I think the younger that we are and the more we're exposed to people with different types of disabilities and are able to kind of digest that, we take it in and it expands our view of what, normal is supposed to be. And yeah, thank you, Dedi. I really appreciate that. Anybody else have any questions or comments?
Rhiana, I appreciated everything that you were talking about, specifically from the infographic, because I loved that you were pulling that and making those like real life experiences, connecting those with the data. I really enjoyed that. And I wanted to say also, we just published yesterday a new digital storytelling interview on our website, and it was from someone from Vernal, so like a little bit different rural area, but someone with a disability. And it's so interesting how many connections I made knowing, her experience that she shared, and then what you're sharing, how many connections between the experiences. One specifically that you had talked about was about the family support, that was one of those benefits to rural living. And that was a huge part of her story that she shared in that interview. And I think I come from a rural area. I don't live in one really right now, but I come from a more rural area, and that was one thing that I felt really strongly I connected with too. So anyway, I just really appreciated you bringing that to life.
Thanks, Mindy. What would do any of you have any comments for me about how how do we define somebody with a disability? Is that self-defined? Do you see a lot of do you run into that with different, the courts having one definition and the hospitals having a different definition, and what that means to be able to, be disabled? Does that mean you have to be receiving disability? What's your experience with trying to, define that?
I comment a little bit on that because of the complexity of that question. Each system has a different type of definitions. The educational system defined in one way, the health system in a different way, the financial system or the government system in a different way. In addition of that, to make it even more complex, each culture has different approaches about what they consider disability. Just for instance, we were doing some work with the Native American population, and when we approach to the group, the definition of disability from their perspective mismatch with our concept or definition of disability, and that is part of the challenge that we do have. And I think communication, it is important, and it is necessary. And that's why one of the questions that I wanna ask you, Rhiana, is related with, how we can improve or make it more intense, that level of communication, that some of the institutions like here in the urban areas or at the universities, we can keep having with the organizations that are in this case in rural areas. Because I can see all the challenges that you have, but also I know that there are services or there are resources here that I know, but you might not know. For example, based on the examples that you were giving, assistive technology is here, or there are insurance for children who doesn't apply for the regular chip, and things that are just coming that are new, but somehow need to be communicated everywhere. And that channel of communication, I think, is important. But how we can improve from your perspective?
From my perspective, I think it would be really helpful to have available some kind of, definition, even if it's, you can adopt that definition or not, or have like an alternative definition. One good example, okay, so we offer homeless services. And when you say homeless, most people understand that means without a home, but they've actually, like, Housing and Urban Development has a definition for homeless. And the interesting thing is, when you work in homeless services, you learn that there's two definitions of homeless or unsheltered. So to be literally homeless by HUD definition means living in a place not meant for human habitation. So that doesn't, I think the immediate assumption when you say homeless is, somebody living outside or on the street, right? Like under an overpass. But if you're living in a shed or a camper that has no services, you know what I mean? Or even a home that everything's been shut off for non-payment, or a car, you are homeless. You're living in a place not meant for human habitation. When there's some other funding that is connected to the educational sector. There's something called the McKinney-Vento law, that they made an alternate definition of homelessness because they had a lot of students that were like kind of couch surfing, perhaps living with a friend, but their families had abandoned them, but they wanted them to have access to, resources and funding for homelessness, even though they were living in a house that had utilities and services and whatnot, but they fit this other definition of homelessness. So I think that having the words, like, am I disabled? Do you have a disability? Having some kind of simple language around that could be given would really help a lot of helping professionals in different sectors to understand and explain that to people. Holly, you have your hand up.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this presentation today. This is fantastic. Really, really appreciated it. I am currently attending Utah State University in the MRC, the Masters of Rehabilitation Counseling program, and I live here in St. George. So the ADA defines disability as having a physical or mental impairment, or having had a history or record of, or being perceived as others as having. And this, I mean, it's so much broader than that, right? I mean, that doesn't just completely encapsulate all of what a disability is. And my background started with the Deaf and Hard of Hearing program for this state, and then I moved on to voc rehab. But the Deaf and Hard of Hearing program, I think of my mother. She was in her 70s. She had started to have some hearing issues and had hearing aids. And so for most people, that's not viewed as really a disability. It's just you're getting older. However, there were so many things that impacted her. I mean, just even from in the rural areas, emergency responders and how they respond to her or did, hugely impactful, and so many issues that there's just not adequate training for first responders and how to help someone or interact with someone that has a disability, even one is, hearing loss in later age. So I think that is a really good question to focus on, and to share. It's so much broader than just what the ADA spec says. And so I appreciate you bringing up the question.
Thanks. And I'll definitely look up that definition as something maybe that, we could incorporate into some of our intake processes when we ask somebody about if they have a disability, because it's a required question on the homeless management information system intake. And OHS hasn't done a really great job of saying what does that mean? And I do think, in my own personal experience too, as a helping professional, not everybody who I would consider, having a disability wants to say that. It either accept it, admit it, identify as it, however you want to say. So, using alternate language such as barrier, this person has a barrier instead of a disability, or, difficulty, or whatever the case might be. Certainly, I think, I think it's important. I take their lead, right? Do they identify with disability? Do they call it a disability? If they don't, then I won't call it a disability either. We'll just say this specific thing is making it difficult for you to do this other thing, right? So we don't need to, you whatever language you're comfortable with, that's what we'll use, and we'll still try to connect you to resources. So
that's wonderful. I love that.
Yeah, well, thank you guys so much. Looks like we have a post survey, and thank you all for the great work that you're doing for everybody here in the state of Utah. I think it definitely lifts me up to see and hear from other people that are helping others as well. So reach out anytime. Mindy has my contact information, and also you can just Google Moab Valley Multicultural Center and contact me through that way as well. All right. I think I'll let everybody get on with their days. Thanks again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you for, yeah, it always happens. It goes longer than the time that we have, but that is a good indicator of the need to expand those conversations. Thank you, everybody.